What if Doctor Who wasn't axed in 1989? Well, that's a question I've been trying to answer for about 4 years, and we're nearly at the end. Currently we're in the mid-2010s as we grow ever closer to the present day, based now purely on 25 years of detailed, complex and convoluted canon to follow, each decision to the next through cause and effect. Let's find out what the next season has in store, thanks to a lot, and I mean a lot, of guesswork. Season 51 would have been broadcast from the 18th of March to the 3rd of June 2017, with a Christmas special airing on Christmas Day 2016 preceding the season. The season episode count would also be reduced from 16 episodes to just 13, including the Christmas special, so 12 in the main season. Also, unlike season 49 and 50, 51 would not be split into two broadcast halves and would all be broadcast in one singular run. But for the sake of this video not being over an hour long, I will be splitting the season into two videos, but the broadcast would not be in two separate runs like 49 and 50. A few creative changes occurred behind the scenes, with only Matthew B. Roberts staying on as the co-executive producer, although former co-exec Tony Graffia, who left mainly to work on the Elysium, would have contributed one script. New co-execs were Jacqueline Rayner, Kevin Murphy and Sarah Dollard, who wrote episode 5 of season 50. All four of these co-execs would have been in the writer's room and helped block out all 13 episodes before they were given off to each individual writer to write. Also, Gaynor Holmes took over as the executive producer for BBC Scotland, replacing Ken McQuarrie for the season. Obviously, a new title sequence and theme would have been commissioned for the season, but I'll let you watch it in full in a second as we dive into the Christmas special, The Last Winter. This episode would have been the Christmas special for 2016 and the first proper story for the 15th Doctor after her introduction over 9 months earlier. The episode would have been heavily promoted by the BBC as it was the first Christmas special since 2010. It was the first story for the new Doctor and would have included guest star William Boyd playing the main villain in this episode, Lord Edwin Wedgwood Hanson. The episode would begin with the 15th Doctor, Riley and Pete landing on the River Thames in February 1814 during the last Great Frost Fair. A lot of the first part of this episode sets the scene as the three explore the area and we get used to the new Doctor. All the while it's implied that the three have a couple of adventures since we last saw them, but not too many. The episode takes a turning point, however, when Riley spots a man standing on London Bridge looking over them, Lord Edwin Wedgwood Hanson. She seems stricken, entirely cold by seeing him, almost as if she knows him. The Doctor spots Riley's reaction and asks if everything's alright, and Riley says that everything's absolutely fine, but the Doctor, noticing Hanson walking away, makes the connection. The episode kind of splits into two plots here, with plot A focusing on Riley and plot B focusing usually on the Doctor and Pete as they solve a mystery about lights into the river and some sort of sea creature living in the Thames. All the while Riley spends most of the episode split up from them with Lord Hanson, who as it actually turns out is the leader of the government in her time in the far future. Riley and Hanson have several scenes together where they discuss the past, which is told through flashbacks as we learn the rest of Riley's backstory. It turns out that after the government developed time travel, Hanson ordered 5 task forces of the time ships to be sent back in time to discover the history of their race being the Skeletti. Please note, if you do not know who the Skeletti are, please watch the videos on the Elysium. Thank you. They travelled from the year 1749 DE, which is 4962 in Earth years, to explore and record the Skeletti's true origins. Riley's time ship was sent back to the Battle of Earth in 2013, whereby they presume the Skelettis originated in some form from Earth. After initially recording Earth's history and transmitting it back to Lord Hanson, he began to give out strange orders, asking Riley's task force to begin altering and changing the history in several different but subtle ways. One person dies here, another person lives there, someone needs to meet someone here, and another person doesn't meet someone there. After we see these flashbacks, which takes us to about the 2/3 point of the episode, and of course all these would be intercut with the Doctor's and Pete's plot about the creatures of the Thames, Hanson asks Riley to fulfill her duty and continue with what she was ordered to do. He says that it's been a long time since they picked up any timeline alterations from Earth. Riley refuses and says she wants nothing to do with him. Riley ends up joining the Doctor and Pete as they find out Hanson's involved in the creature and has been some sort of harvesting it for fuel, trapping it under the Thames, unable to move. Against Riley's wishes, the Doctor ends up confronting Hanson, which becomes a bit of a chess match as Riley is trying to keep control of the conversation so Hanson doesn't say anything about who she really is, all the while the Doctor's a nerd because Riley's acting very strange now, and she's also at the same time trying to get to the bottom of the sea creature business. Eventually, Hanson reveals the truth and says that part of Riley's mission all along was to infiltrate the TARDIS and find herself close to the Doctor, as they know the Doctor was integral to the creation of the Skeletti. Riley says that being with the Doctor changed her, but now the Doctor feels betrayed. Nevertheless, Riley sticks with the Doctor and does everything she can to stop Hanson proving herself. The plot reaches a climax as Hanson reveals that he's placed a bomb under the ice, which will feed the creature but kill hundreds who are on the ice. The Doctor, Riley and Pete race off to stop this, but things change when the only way to prevent this from happening and defuse the bomb, while also releasing the sea creatures, is for Riley to make the decision to side with Lord Hanson as he leaves the ultimatum for her. Riley makes this decision and turns against the Doctor once more. There's a big confrontation now between the two pairs of Hanson and Riley against the Doctor and Pete, mainly playing out on the emotions of the Doctor's betrayal. The Doctor has little mercy and teleports Riley and Hanson away in a complex Deus Ex Machina into the vacuum of space, essentially, as far as she knows, executing the two of them, which leaves Pete undoubtedly shocked. The episode ends with the Doctor and Pete return to the TARDIS after they have a conversation about this, and Pete confronts her. The Doctor admits that she did have a lot of love for Riley and did really take a shine to her, but she was a traitor and she feels horribly, horribly betrayed. She then admits that she is somewhat regretful of what she's just done, and that if it had been her old self she probably wouldn't have done it, but she's not her old self and she has no time for regret now. Before the Doctor sets the TARDIS to the next destination as it enters flight. And then we see the other side of Lord Hanson and Riley's teleport into the vacuum of space. They're alone, freezing over, but within a second a sound of a TARDIS sounds as it materialises around them, but it's completely different inside, dark and dingy. We don't see who's piloting this TARDIS or who has rescued them, but Riley simply says, "You," recognising the person standing there, before Hanson says, "Lord Rogue, how nice to see you again," as we cut to the end credits. This episode is our season opener and introduces new companion, Sally Brennan. It is set in the fictional northern village of Beesmere and mainly focuses around Madison Road Primary, where Sally works there as a teacher. Like a lot of the companion introduction stories, this episode is told from Sally's perspective as she's introduced to the Doctor and Pete's world. The episode is a fun action-packed ride as there's a lot of strange things going on in the school, with children regularly going missing. We find that the Doctor is posing as one of Madison Road's new teachers, while Pete takes the cover of an inspector sent by the Department of Education. The Doctor, posing as Mrs. Jones Smith, initially meets Sally in the staff room at the start of the episodes, but Sally becomes more and more wrapped in the plot due to the fact that her granddaughter Jade is in the Doctor's class, and obviously she's constantly looking out for her. It turns out that some sort of alien creature is taking and possessing children for their own ends, and the Doctor discovers it started at the same time that each pupil's fingerprints were taken 2 months ago for the school's new biometric security system introduced by the new Education Secretary, Oliver Griffiths. The Doctor and Pete are shocked, as they were sure that Griffiths was locked away in a unit cell. The Doctor phones unit and asks him what happened, but they tell him that the Prime Minister got him out on his authority and pardoned him for his crimes. The Doctor tells unit that maybe Oliver Griffiths might be back in the cell soon, before he explains what's been happening with the kids. With the help of Caitlin Ryan, Sergeant Wilson, and the rest of the unit, the Doctor, Pete and now Sally, after an intense scene where Sally's upset about the safety of her granddaughter and the Doctor reveals who she is to her, they manage to sever the biometric connection to the aliens. However, as Act 3 starts, a massive spaceship lands up ahead and troops teleport down. Rutan troops. It turns out they've been working with Oliver Griffiths to take a supply of children to use on the battlefield against the Centaurans. The Doctor manages to save the day with the help of Sally, Pete and Unit and the sheer force of lots and lots of angry parents up in arms, and they blow up the Rutan spaceship, which in turn also blows up the school. We finish the episode with Sally taking Jade back home to her and her wife, Annie. The Doctor asks about their family situation, but Sally says there's not much to say. Jade is her son, Ricky's daughter, but his wife died a few years ago and he hasn't been able to cope, so she and Annie have taken her in. The Doctor compliments Sally's resource in the attack, but says they could do with someone like her travelling with herself and Pete. Sally rejects the offer, saying she'd love to, but she has responsibility not just to Jade but a load of kids, and then Jade tells her to go. and says that she and Nanny Annie will be fine together and she should take this opportunity. Sally still says no, but then when the Doctor opens the doors of the TARDIS, Sally's eyes widen as she sees the inside. Sally checks with Annie and Jade that it's definitely okay before she kisses them goodbye, and the Doctor, Sally and Pete leaving the TARDIS. Finally, the episode ends with Kate, Ryan and Unit raiding Oliver Griffiths' office, where they find it empty and is nowhere to be seen. This episode continues on from the first one, where we see Sally's first adventure in the TARDIS. The Doctor takes her and Pete to 28th century Earth to prove to Sally the immense power of the TARDIS. However, they end up getting involved in a major historical event, but in our relative future, the assassination of the System Security Council, 15 leaders from 15 different planets affiliated with Earth. The Doctor tells Sally and Pete that only one of the assassins was ever caught, and he was later proved to be nothing but their T-boy. The actual killers of the council were never found, and thus the episode diverges to the Doctor, Sally and Pete tracking down and finding the assassins. Obviously the usual "you can't change history" message is battered to Sally in the story. She expresses her desire to try and stop the assassination, but Pete talks her out of it, explaining why doing so would be so dangerous and giving context about Riley. Eventually the trio find the assassins, and there are a group of extremist Earth nationalists who don't believe in the expansion into space nor the sharing of resources with other planets. The climax of this episode sees the Doctor and the leader of the nationalist group, Krasko, having somewhat of a philosophical and ethical debate, which is intercut with Sally and Pete doing other things, dealing with the aftermath of the assassination, but everything builds up to Krasko revealing that the Doctor isn't the only time traveller that's come back in time to try and stop the assassination. And the one that he just dealt with before her left something behind before he holds up a vortex manipulator. He then tells the Doctor that to stop the opening up and welcoming of all these other alien races, you have to cut off the head where the problem started, when the humans first opened the doors to the other, before he activates the vortex manipulator and vanishes. The Doctor is left appalled and shocked before finding Sally and Pete and quickly hounding them into the TARDIS. She says they have to travel back to the past to save the future. She tracks the TARDIS onto Krasko's Artron signature and realises that he's travelled back to the 30th of November 1955, Montgomery, Alabama. This episode opens with a previously recap before jumping straight into the plot and continuing straight on from where we left off, with the Doctor piloting the TARDIS to Montgomery 1955. The episode shows the events leading up to and including the arrest of Rosa Parks and the advent of the Civil Rights Movement. It sees the Doctor, Sally and Pete track Krasko back to try and stop him from preventing Rosa Parks from refusing to move on a segregated bus. It's made especially hard by the fact both the Doctor and Pete are black and Sally is a second generation Indian, which the Americans mistake as Mexican. The three of them eventually manage to stop Krasko by recoding his vortex manipulator to send him back to the Jurassic Age, before they further make sure that Rosa's arrest goes ahead in spite of changes Krasko's already made. The episode then ends after all that with the TARDIS arriving in 1966, where the three of them attend the audience of President Clinton awarding a much older Rosa Parks with the President a Medal of Freedom. The last shot sees old Rosa looking down at the audience, seeing the Doctor, Sally and Pete as a tear rolls down her cheek. This episode sees the TARDIS arrive back in Beesmere, where Sally reunites with Annie and Jade, having only been gone for 6 days by their time. However, while Sally spends time with the two of them back at her home, the Doctor and Pete get involved in a strange set of occurrences that have been happening in the village, and the two of them have begun to investigate. The episode evolves into a mix of a standard haunted house story crossed with a spooky village where everyone seems to be involved in some sort of conspiracy. It turns out that an entity, which has taken the form of a Victorian bride calling itself Miss Mercy, has been captured and cloning members of the village, replacing them so she can use the original to feed on their mental energy. Events get even worse when it's revealed that the exact same thing has happened to Sally's wife, Annie, and then the episode becomes, from Sally's point of view, a rescue mission for her wife. Eventually the Doctor, Sally and Pete do save the day and put everything back to rights, which loosens Miss Mercy's power and essentially kills her. But Miss Mercy makes a request as she slips into death. She tells the Doctor to save her people, go to the planet Kalia, and stop her people from dying, and she only did what she did to stay alive, and that can be stopped by banishing the invaders from her planet. The Doctor agrees to the promise. The episode then ends with Sally saying goodbye to Annie and Jade again before the TARDIS takes off for Cadia. This episode sees the TARDIS land on Cadia, following Miss Mercy's message. It's a desolated, ravaged planet where the Doctor, Sally and Pete are soon captured by the savage-like people who call themselves the Dervish. The story evolves into a Doctor helps the rebel story as we find out that the Dervish people are being oppressed by the invading Taurians. The standard thing happens in the story, including the Doctor being taken away by the Taurians, leading to Sally and Pete being left with the Dervish. About a third of the way through the episode, it's revealed that the Dervish are actually a subsect of the Taurians and betray Sally and Pete to them. Meanwhile, the Doctor manages to escape the Taurians by persuading the Doctor, looking over her, to betray their people and swap sides for a crisis of conscience. The two of them, the Doctor and Dr. Jeria, flee the Taurian capital city to the set piece of a massive run-in with the army involving a tank. It's here that both the Doctor, Jeria, Sally and Pete come together, as they all converge on the actual indigenous species of the planet, the Kalians, who are nothing like the imposters, the Dervish. They are weak and frail, oppressed to the point of negligence, and they are just left to die and starve by the Taurians and the Dervish. However, it is revealed they actually have telepathic powers, and their weak and frail nature comes from the fact they have their mental abilities are being harnessed with power by a machine created by the Taurians, who are using it to prolong their lives for hundreds of years. The story ends with everyone mounting a mission to the building where the machine is located, and the Doctor blows it up, freeing the Kalians and giving them the strength to kick the Taurians and the Dervish off the planet. This episode begins with the Doctor, Sally and Pete landing on a planet called Commercilia, which is a giant shopping centre which spans a whole planet. The three of them go out shopping for the first few minutes, buying all sorts of exotic goods, and soon the Doctor splits off from the other two, getting distracted by herself. The Doctor discovers murmurs amongst the people of the high amount of missing persons, but it seems impossible on a planet like Commercilia, as it's all one building completely covered by security. There's nowhere to go missing. The Doctor ends up investigating, discovering that it's the Daleks, hiding out in the disused shop. The last remnants of the original Dalek race apparently more escaped ascension than the Doctor first thought. Their casings are battered and burnt. They are damaged, but moving and working. Around them, the Doctor discovers water tanks filled with Dalek-like creatures, but not exactly the same. As it turns out, these are people the Dalek have kidnapped and are trying to turn into new Dalek mutants. The plot develops as Sally and Pete get involved, including being captured by a collaborator at Commercilia, who is working for the Daleks, before the Doctor inevitably defeats them. She does this by cracking out the incubator tanks, which have the half-converted Daleks in, which they are in many ways still half-human. They, because of this, are still conscious and they're filled with rage because of what the Daleks have done to them. And they fight back against the Daleks, killing them. And because of their strength, they will die themselves. The Doctor smiles as she says this Dalek race are finally, truly extinct. This episode sees the Doctor, Sally and Pete travelling back to 1819 Manchester during the Industrial Revolution and covers the events of the Peterloo Massacre, and it is another pure historical. It revolves around the trio getting involved with a group of over 60,000 people who are protesting about their rights, especially due to the many awful working conditions some of them have had to deal with, which a lot of the first part of the episode sees the Doctor, Sally and Pete seeing. However, the protest becomes a riot which forces the cavalry to come in and deal with the situation. Just over a dozen people die, including one of the characters we've come to know, but many, many more are injured heavily. The rest of the episode revolves around not just the historical implications of the event, but also the moral one and the idea that social justice that many people deserve. The episode did, however, spark some controversy at the time from extreme right-wing groups amongst the Doctor Who fan community, who saw this adaptation of a historical event, an actual historical event, as apparent BBC communist propaganda. And that's what I'm saying about Season 51 for now, as episodes 8 to 12 will be covered in the next video, so until the next time, goodbye.